Good morning, Mike and Arlen. Our Philippine journey, right there. There you go. I have to kind of watch. Hey, thanks for joining. And let me get a couple things out of the way because this is going to be a controversial video. And I want to make sure a couple things are very clear to start with. The first one is that this is an opinion. I'm not pointing a finger at people. I'm not naming people. I'm not saying that other people aren't entitled to their opinions. What I am saying is that I want to provide a forum by which we can stimulate the idea for conversation and we can begin to stimulate a commentary. What becomes vastly apparent, I guess is the best word, is that, you know, bloggers that there are just so many bloggers worldwide. And we talk about the invasion of all the Philippine bloggers, of which I could be considered one, even though Arlen and I have been here for years. All right. We haven't been blogging for years. But I think that that's because people concentrate on the area that they're in. So YouTube is not pushing other stuff as often from other areas. So, I'm not sure exactly how relevant I would say there's a million new vloggers here and that the Philippines has been inundated with them any more or any less than anywhere else. Now, the second thing I'd like to say is been working with some new software, and one of the things now, instead of having sticky notes all over my screen to refer back to as I speak to you with notes, I've kind of got a different setup now where I have another monitor where my notes are to keep them in order. And I do these notes because I want to make sure I cover the subject matter without forgetting, and I want to make sure that I'm also getting through it without any as much ums, whatever. All right. I want to try and get the information to you as quickly as possible. So, with that being said, let's get into the root of the conversation. And that is, we want to discuss today the differences between the three types of men who come to the Philippines and the three types of, well, let's just leave it at the three types of men because there's a lot to be included in this. All right. So no matter whether you want to admit it or not, whether you want to be able to feel comfortable with the category that you would fit into, you're going to fit into one of three major categories, five if you count two ancillary categories. All right. Are you an expat? Are you a sexpat? Are you a tourist? Are you an immigrant? And finally, can you begin as one and end up as another? So what I'm going to say to that is that, that's a category only because what you are today does not define what you will be in a year. An example of that, well, I'll get to that example when we cover that stuff too. It's in my notes. Kind of liking this, but I hate looking down every time. I hope it's not too distracting. Let me know in the comments. Let me know. Finally, also, hey, look, we're a small channel. We're not trying to make a living doing this, but it is personal goals by which we say, oh, we should, can I pick up an extra 10 subscribers? Do I get a couple extra views? Whatever. Hey, look, if you find this informative, if you find it entertaining, if you find out that it's possible you want additional information, don't hesitate to subscribe. In fact, we encourage you to subscribe. And finally, that thumbs up button. You hear it everywhere, every time. You'll see it through here. Okay? Hit that thumbs up because it's vitally important in the algorithm for YouTube to push our information out as a choice to others. So thank you very much. And if you're a returning subscriber, of course, we obviously thank you. So, expat, sexpat, tourist, immigrant. All right? Those are the big ones. All right? Those are the big ones. And there are a lot of schools of thought that go with all of these. But most guys, all guys, are going to fall into one of these three categories or a combination of one of these three categories. All right. Also, what's important to recognize is that all men, depending on the category that you're in, that category is going to have an impact on where you live and how you live. But we need to define these things because, you know what? There are so many bloggers that don't know the difference, or they're just out after the clickbait and the news and the views in order to promote the direction. Well, we're not. We're simple, and we're just going to give you the truth. And we're going to give you the data to back up the truth. Stick around, get a beer, get a coffee, get whatever. Order pizza. May have to make this more than just one video. All right, but we've done a lot to get a considerable amount of information. So, what is an expat? Well, the Oxford Dictionary defines an expat as a person who lives outside their native country. Okay, let's move that a little closer. What is an expat? An expat is a person, as defined by the Oxford Language Dictionary, okay, as a person who lives outside of their native country, or a person living outside of their native country, which I am not quite sure how that makes much of a verbal difference. However, whatever. Okay? It's kind of interesting to denote that you can start as one and begin as another. All right? And what I mean by that is there's a difference between an expat and an immigrant. All right. You're considered an expat here in the Philippines if once you have a ACR card, or Alien Certificate of Registration ID card. Okay? And that is because it has an address, a permanent address. So in the Philippines, you're an expat once you have a permanent address that is current to your ACR card. Now, in the legal sense, I'm not a lawyer, all right? And in the legal sense, these things are very muddy because the Philippine laws are actually very muddy, I guess is the best word for it. But that's what an expat is. Now, you can start out as a tourist, and you can't even get an ACR card until you've been in country continuously for a certain period of time. And maybe on another video, I'll do ACR cards. But for now, you have to be here for a minimum of, I think it's at least 60 days before you can apply. All right. And you have to have certain requirements and everything else. All right. But you start out as a tourist. Okay. You can't apply overseas for an ACR card because you have to go for an interview in order to get that. So then you become an expat. Now, can an expat be an immigrant? It can be done, all right? There are such things as non-quota visas, all right? And there are ways to get Philippine citizenship. And once you get that Philippine citizenship, yeah, you're an immigrant, okay? But it's very difficult to do, and this is not the time and place to go through it. The really most important part of what I'm trying to get to here is, how do we decide if you're an expat, all right, or a sexpat? Because that's a big difference. You see, contrary to popular belief amongst all these YouTube videos that keep getting pushed to you about Walking Street and about Flower Street and about some of the other streets and some of the, P. Borges Street, all right, there's far more to the Philippines than that, number one. And number two, there are far more reasons to live here than that. You can have people, for instance, who are just in love with the Philippines, the Philippine culture, and they prefer that and that way of living more than their native country. They're unhappy in their native country for whatever reasons, whether it's political, social, whatever. Okay, we don't need to cover that. But that is what happens to some people. They come here for that reason. They come here because their dollar spends more, buys more. All right, they're able to start a new life or modify a new life, something like that. That's an expat. You're going to come here, you're going to establish residency, and you're going to establish a life. Now, that doesn't mean you can't move around, shop around, look around, sure. All right, then you have to, let me read my notes here. Okay, yeah. So you start off as a tourist no matter what, unless you're coming over on a 13A visa. Now, I'm going to tell you just a minute about a 13A visa. 13A visa, and actually there are varying degrees to the 13A visa, but essentially a 13A visa means you are the spouse of a Filipino. Okay, whether you're a woman married to a male Philippine citizen, or whether you're a male married to a female Philippine citizen. And I'm also going to correct something else. And I'm not going to point fingers. Recently, again, this goes into other parts and pieces. But recently, I've had the opportunity, I guess is the best word, to watch a couple of blogs from a couple of these Philippine bloggers. All right. And actually, I shouldn't even say Philippine bloggers. I should say foreign bloggers living in the Philippines. All right. Where they talk about, well, I had to wait till I was here. Then I had to get an ACR card. Then I had to wait. And then I could apply for my 13A. And then I had to wait and I couldn't leave the country during the 13A process. Well, that's just bullshit. Okay. In fact, in my opinion, and I am a 13A, it's actually easier to get a 13A outside of the country than it is in the country. Only because of the hoops you have to go through here. And so I'll preface that by saying, depending on where you live. So if you live, oops, wrong button. If you live within reasonable distance, or suppose you live in the south of the United States, okay? Like I did. All right. All you have to do is fill out the 13A paperwork and you send it to the Philippine consulate in Atlanta, Georgia. And from there, all you do is wait for them to arrange a interview. Now, you do need to have your spouse with you. So your spouse has to be in the U.S., all right, for you to do that. But you can apply for a 13A from the United States. My wife in the United States, my wife green card, my wife, easy to do all of these things. Atlanta's a hop, skip, and a jump from the Charlotte area, which is where we were when we would have done that. Now, I did do my 13A here, but doing a 13A here will require that you go to one of only a handful of places to do your interview. And the lines are excessive unless you have a fixer that can take you to the front of the line. My point being, you don't have to be in, if your spouse is a Philippine citizen with a Philippine passport, you can arrange to get your 13A through the Philippine consulate in LA. There's a Philippine consulate in Atlanta, and I think there's one in Chicago, maybe somewhere. I can't remember. There's several of them, but not they're not all over the place, that's for sure. Here you have to go, for instance, if you live in Luzon, your only choice is to go to Intramuros to complete the 13A. Okay? But either way, that's, again, another long story. And that's all there is to it. So you can go back to what we were talking about. Start as a tourist and end up with your 13A. But you're still, at that point, not a citizen of the Philippines. I am not a citizen. I am a permanent resident. And that makes me an expat. Now, I could be both an expat and a sexpat if I would so desired, I guess. All right? And so let's talk about what is a sexpat, because people are just getting this so confused with respect to what am I and what are all these other people. And they seem to tend to think that sexpats are the vast majority of the foreigners here. And I think that is really getting not just out of hand, but it is totally misconstrued. All right? It is a double standard, and I'll tell you why I think it's a double standard. So, a sexpat, according to the Urban Dictionary, is anyone who moves to another country for the main reason of obtaining easier sex. And that includes copulating with pros and civilians. Keep that in mind. That is a very important part. All right. Wiktionary describes it as, or defines it as, an expatriate who engages in sex tourism. Well, I guess you can be a tourist and a sexpat at the same time. But let's get back to these other pieces here in the Urban Dictionary. Let's get back and let's do some comparisons, because this is where I think people get a bad name. I think there are some misconstrued people. Now, without a doubt, I think the vast majority of expats in the Philippines are here for reasons that have nothing to do with obtaining services from professional girls. All right? And we can define that any way you want. However, I'll let it be for now because I want it to go back to what I'm trying to get across. We, as men and women, want to procreate. Now, I can't help that for most of us, the art of procreation is enjoyable. All right? I can guarantee you that if in order to procreate, you had to stick a needle in your eye, there'd be far less children around than there are today. The world's population would be significantly smaller. It's an opinion, not a fact. I can't back that up. But I can tell you, I wouldn't want to do it or try to do it if I had to stick a needle in my eye every time. Or even once, to be honest with you. So what's different between being in their native country and being in the Philippines? Well, the cost of living is different. Okay. Well, that means that the cost of dating is different. It also means that the expectations are different. So, for instance, if I were single, I could date very nice women at a fifth of the cost, even by Western standards, in the US. So if I was a guy, I mean, think about this for a second. If I was a guy and I wanted to enlarge the dating pool of desirable women that were available to me, I would want to do it in the most economic method possible. Now, the argument behind that is that you're taking advantage of uneducated or undereducated people in a economy that is conducive to abuse. And I don't mean physical abuse, although that's possible. What I'm talking about is abusing that situation. Well, I don't see it like that. I really don't. I have friends, all right, guys that I know, who I clearly think in the back of my mind, I would define as sexpats. But in reality, they're not out every night looking for a date. And in fact, they date pretty much in a manner that is emotionally satisfying to them. And if that means that they are treating somebody to dinner, well, that's going to be a minimum that you do in the U.S., isn't it? I mean, if you date a girl in the U.S., you're going to be treating them to dinner. You go to dinner in the United States. Now, I mean, if you're in Podunk, Arkansas, I guess you can go to, they have cheaper places to eat. But let's just say, I can give you in Phoenix, I can tell you, you can't take a woman to dinner, to a average, decent dinner. If you wanted to go to, say, Papa Do's and get some really good Cajun food, you're going to drop $100. Here, although really great Cajun food's hard to come by, you can get reasonably good Mexican food. You can get really good. Actually, I should say differently there, because we went out last night to a new place and I had some of the best soft tacos I've ever had. And we used to have a residence, we had a place in Mexico. I've eaten, street tacos forever. These things were delicious. $20 for my wife and I. And that included chips, salsa, all right, a couple diet sodas, and a glass of wine for my wife. Yeah, where would I want to go? I mean, aren't you going to spend that in the U.S.? What else are you going to go through? You're paying for it one way or the other. Whether you're paying for the search or you skip the search and just directly pay for the service. Or you do both. So what happens if you're here and you're dating multiple women, looking for that one right woman? You may have to date a dozen, 2 dozen, 3 dozen. You may never find the right woman. I mean, you're here already without the right woman, huh? Didn't you already? I'm going to make the assumption you're not a loser and you did date in the United States, okay? Even if you got married, you dated before you got married. And for many, if not all, but many at least, you dated after you weren't married, before you came here. You're going to spend money. Does that make you a sexpat in your own country? Just because you're dating multiple women looking for the right woman? No. And for some guys, dating multiple women can be one date a month with 5 different women, 5 times a month. All right? Who's to say and define what these things are? Yeah, it's a little food for thought there. All right? I'm not going to buy this whole taking advantage of the economics of another country. Okay? I can tell you that of the working girls that we know, and we know quite a few because there's so many of them. And where we live, there are so many single guys. So we run into quite a few of them there. And some of the guys that we have dated for a year, 2 years, and then they all of a sudden found the right girl. Does that mean there's a sexpat? Or did they magically transform from a sexpat to an expat because they found the right girl? Is it because you're dating that makes you a sexpat? I can't buy that shit. I'm sorry. And I know a lot of you are going to disagree with that. I know a lot of you will. A lot of you will say, okay, if you don't go out with bar girls, why not? I'm not saying I do or would, all right, or did, because I didn't. But I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with it. I'm not condemning or condoning anybody. You can't judge another person until you walk a mile in their shoes. You don't know what's going on in their mind. I'm not talking about you can't, understand the stress and the issues that someone has trying to support family members, so therefore they're reduced to becoming a bar girl, which brings up another subject all and of its own. Not every girl in those bars will allow you to bar fine them. Some of those girls do not bar fine at all. But they might date you. All right? You might be able to take them to dinner and that relationship may progress. And if along the way you help them out a little bit and you help their family out a little bit, is that a sexpat? Or is that, as my friend says, being a humanitarian? Yeah, I'll get a ration of shit for that as well. But it is what one of my friends does say. With those things in mind, are you an expat or are you a sexpat? Can you start out as a tourist, become a sexpat, and then end up as an expat? Or can you start as an expat, and then by virtue of the fact that you're dating and seeing people, you get told you're a sexpat? Or by virtue of the fact that you go to meet women in the easiest places for you to meet them. All right, let's talk about that. Oh, you shouldn't go to the bars. You shouldn't meet women at the bars. You hear this all the time. You know, uh, uh, there's an old blogger, which I'm not going to get into, and I don't mean an old guy. He's really not old at all. All right, but he's been around a long, long time, many, many years. Okay. And he actually said at one time the best places to meet women are like at the Mercado, the shopping areas. Well, that's one place. That's one place where if you have 10 women, 3 of them won't speak fluent English. So that's a little bit of a hurdle. And it depends on which city. All right. If you have 10 women, several of them are probably married or have boyfriends. This is reducing the number of available, instances for you to strike up a conversation. Well, if you go to a bar, odds are almost every girl in that bar is willing to sit down, strike up a conversation, and have a drink with you. Wow. I would much rather spend, $4 or $5 buying a girl if I was looking. All right. Much rather from an economic point of view, because I think my time is valuable, even though I'm retired and have a lot of time. I guess my time is worth far less than it used to be. But I would think that my time is worth $6 to buy a girl a drink at a bar where there are 30 girls and they're all willing, or the vast majority of them are willing to sit down, chat with you, and have a drink. Does that make a sexpat? Because he goes to a bar, because he goes to the easiest place to find companionship. Now, that doesn't mean that just because he goes to the easiest place to find companionship, all right, that he's not constantly looking in other places as well. So now is he a sexpat during the day, but an expat at night? I'm not sure how that really works. Or is he a sex tourist? And that obviously is a whole nother discussion, and that can be pretty rampant. But for those people who live here, all right, we don't have a right to try and define what's behind the eyes, between the ears, and the brain of another man. We haven't walked a mile in their shoes. We don't know what drives them or motivates them. And neither do you. You know even far less if you don't live here, trying to judge them. And again, I don't condemn or condone, but what I do say is that there's far more to it. Finally, I think it's important to understand I have seen people evolve from one end of the spectrum to the other. And while we have some other important facts to bring across, I think one of the things that we bring across is the fact that transformation is a part of everybody's life. Now, before I get to the final pieces of this, I'm going to say something. here's what I'm going to say. Based on the comments that I get and the feedback that I get back, I'm going to know who actually watched this entire video, or at least skip through it to get all of the information within it. Because I'm going to say this right now, and this should be a thought that goes through your mind before you comment on any part and piece. There are plenty of women here in the Philippines who, through no fault of their own, are in circumstances that they had no control over, and that is why they earn a living doing what they do. There are girls that don't have an education. There are girls that have an education, but not a secondary education. And their jobs that they sit in prevent them from going any further. Their circumstances dictate that they stay in those jobs because they have to send money home. They're supporting their parents. They're supporting their siblings. There's 100 reasons. They may have children of their own. My point is, you can't judge people until you walk in their shoes. And you don't walk in their shoes on a routine basis. All right? Am I an expat? Am I a sexpat? Which one am I? What am I? We've certainly fed girls that we know that are quote unquote working girls. We've certainly provided food for them. During COVID, a lot of food got distributed out to them. Secondarily to that, we don't have a problem going to a bar and buying a girl a drink so she makes commissions. We generally only buy drinks for girls that we actually know, that we've been introduced to and know through friends. Okay. Like I said, where we live, there are quite a few. Running into bar girls in the elevator is not uncommon. And so we run into them. Okay. They'll be here for a week, 2 weeks, staying with a temporary boyfriend. All right. So buying them a drink is no big deal. Does that make us sexpats? I don't think so. I totally disagree with it. It was not certainly on my mind. Just because we live in Angeles City, all right, with the infamous walking street, that doesn't make us any less than somebody that lives in Makati or BGC. And trust me, both of those areas have areas just like walking street. Okay? Maybe sometimes a little bit more high class. All right. So now getting back to where I was before. Are you an expat or are you a sexpat? I can tell you that we've had friends that have come here as tourists, decided to return as expats, and they dated for years, and sometimes they still haven't found the right girl. Some of them have. So are they sexpats because they were looking for the right girl? I don't think so. I think that what happens is YouTubers trying to gain that almighty clickbait, pump up that. I think that there are far less guys here who only come for one reason, and that is to be like a butterfly and flit from girl to girl. Now, I don't. I got to tell you, there are plenty of them. Don't get me wrong, but not the vast majority, by any way, shape, or means. Okay, And I can't help but think that it's the same way in most other cities. There's always exceptions to the rules. We talked about that in the beginning. But that is the way that I sort of feel about it. Now, this should help open up, I'm hoping, opens up a channel for discussion and commentary, because it'd be interesting to hear how your opinions differ than mine. Don't hold back, be honest, and be truthful, okay? But keep in mind, I'm going to defend my position of you don't know until you've done it. Now, there are exceptions to every rule. There are bad people, bad men, bad women, bad circumstances. That shit happens. And you need to recognize that. It happens in the U.S. I sit here and I look at what transpires in the U.S. You know what? Here's a good example. Okay. Now, I'm a little older. Many of you were not around during the heyday of Craigslist. Okay. And certainly you're around now and know about Tinder. And certainly you're well aware of Ashley Madison. And certainly you're aware of sugar daddies dot whatever. Okay. How is that any different than here? Don't condemn people when what happens in your own backyard is no different. Don't do it. Okay? I'm not saying you should condone it. I'm not saying you should not have your own opinion, but don't condemn a group of individuals when they're no different than another group. It's just interesting. It really and truly is. I think it provides a little bit of food for thought. I think it provides a ability for you to comment and provide commentary to say, hey, you know what, Mike? I don't agree, or I do agree. I can tell you that for most of you, you won't have many more examples than I have of good stories, of relationships that did turn out good, of people who are happy, because we know a lot of them, quite a few of them. We have a number of Filipino American marriages that we know. We have quite a few, a large number of Filipino American boyfriend girlfriend situations. And we have quite a few friends that are, you know what? I'm just looking, and until I find exactly what I want, I'm going to keep looking. And why shouldn't I enjoy myself while I'm looking? Still not sure that makes them a sexpat. I think by definition, you're thinking a sexpat, or some people think, not you, all right? But some people think a sexpat comes here solely because of the economics involved. I'm saying the economics play a part of why they left, why they're not in the U.S. That's what plays a big role. Why should I have to destroy myself economically when I'm looking for my future one? I guess, I don't know, how to describe that, girlfriend, whatever you want to call it. All right. Why shouldn't men be able to date whoever they want? They may not make wise choices. I mean, we all know men often don't think with the right head, but their intention might be good. It's just like YouTubers. Their intention may be good. There are some great YouTube channels out there whose information and everything that goes along with it is excellent. Excellent. And they do a far better job than I do of making it. And they cover a far better number of topics than I do. There are YouTubers out there that just spew garbage and clickbait. Just like you have to pick who you're going to watch on YouTube, you would pick who you date. It's that simple. But to define the fact that, I have seen people, just because you're a single guy here makes you a sexpat. I disagree with that 100%. 1,000, I don't know, that's 100% is really the most you can, right? So I disagree. And I disagree that all expats are sexpats. Totally disagree. Now, when it comes to sex tourists, yeah, let's face it. We see it. We see it quite often. They're over here for 2 weeks, generally. Some of them a month. But most of the time, it's just 2 weeks. All right? They're 2-week millionaires, and they're blowing through a large number of dollars to get exactly what it is they want. Well, yeah, they're a sex tourist. Okay? Because it's available. They would do the same thing in their own native country. There's plenty of available women for hire. They just wouldn't be able to afford to do it for 2 weeks, generally. So your thoughts. Look, if you've been entertained by this, if you've learned anything from this, if you think you have something to add, if you would just like to say, hey, disagree, sorry, Mike, please comment. Please do. I'd like to see where the commentary goes on this. Finally, hit that thumbs up. That thumbs up makes such a big difference in the algorithm for us. All right? We want to really thank you for stopping in. I hope you didn't suffer through all of this, but if you did, let me figure out what's going on there. Yeah, if you did, wow, I'm really impressed. Okay? But thank you. Thank you for what you did view. Thank you for viewing it. And thank you for being out there and listening. And if you're a subscriber already, thank you for keeping us in your mind when you're looking for material to laugh about. Have a great day. Hope it's going well for you.